Hello and welcome to the big picture. Today we are looking at the media scenario in this country. The last week there was a big bang of sorts when we read in the newspapers and heard on television the major investments of Reliance Industries into a major television network, TV18. This is only the latest, but this is the biggest which has happened in Indian media scene. A lot of questions and doubts and concerns have been raised following these investments, and so we are looking today at what corporate investments into the media means. To discuss this, I have an extremely eminent panel with me, Mr. S. Nihal Singh, member of the Editors Guild of India and one of the most senior journalists in this country, Madhu Trehan, director of newslaundry.com, and incidentally, she was the founder, editor of India Today magazine way back in the 1970s. And Mr. Dilip Cherian of the Corporate Voice, one of the keen media watchers in this country, and also Sevanthi Nainan, a media critic who has been a very effective voice talking about the media scene in this country. Welcome to all of you. Let me first go to Mr. Nihal Singh. Mr. Singh, when you read about these investments in the newspaper and heard about it, what was your first feeling?
Well, my first reaction was that I think it was time for India to have a really good anti-monopoly law for media, which is the norm in all democratic countries in the world,
yes,
including the most advanced. And I think we need that kind of a law.
Okay. Madhu?
You
have been, you have been in many media organizations. I mean, you have started many media organizations. You think these kind of investments have become inevitable?
Well, since it's happened, it's become inevitable, but I would say that it need not have happened. If, one, the government was more alert, and two, the other corporates, their competitors were more alert. So democracy is not a free ride. Everybody has to be working on it. And if their competitors were alert and aware, especially knowing that the Mukesh Ambani is rolling out the broadband and what content he requires for that broadband, they should have been able to anticipate such things, especially knowing if they're in the market and in the business, they should have known which companies are in trouble, are in the red, and naturally Mukesh Ambani would be looking for it.
Madhu,
so the government was asleep, the competitors were asleep.
No, Madhu, how would it have mattered if the competitors were aware of it?
Well, they could have manipulated their competition into place. There would have been something that they could have done in order to compete for the same things. It wouldn't have been one person.
So your concern is not actually the investments. Your concern is what will happen to the competitors.
No. My concern is that one person owns much too much. Already policy is being decided by corporates. All kinds of policy, telecom policy, industrial policy, even everything is being decided as has come out in the 3G tapes,
right,
that so much is being influenced by the corporates of policy which affects all of us, of which we have no say, but lobbyists do. And in this sense, I think it's very dangerous for one company to be owning that much of not only oil, but the media. So of all the crucial businesses that Mukesh Ambani owns, the problem is that not only is it dangerous that he's deciding what policy will be decided, as you know has happened in the past.
Right.
Now, whether we can even talk about it or criticize it,
right,
or expose it,
right,
that is in danger.
Dilip, will this lead to some kind of an oligopoly in the media?
Globally, the problem is that we've seen what happens when big capital enters. That is exactly what we are about to replicate for ourselves.
Right.
My anxiety is that oligopolistic tendencies are visible in global media today.
Right.
So whether it's a Berlusconi, whether it's the name that dare not be mentioned, Murdoch, the fact is that all of these players exercise a humongous influence not on media, but on politics.
Right.
Now, what we are talking about is, are we headed down the same road? The answer is, at this point of time, we seem to be. And is it good? The universal answer seems to be from the voice of the customer, the
ordinary viewer.
the consumer of news, as it
Right.
were, is this isn't good, not because it affects the quality of news, but it affects the quality of politics. So
Right.
that's the question.
Okay. Sevanthi, coming to you. Sevanthi, you heard what the panelists in the studio have said. You have been a media critic. You have had your share of problems when you have written about these things. The latest, I don't know whether you like to mention, but anyway, this kind of investments of major corporate houses in the media, how do you see it, and where do you think it will all lead to?
Well, at one level, there's just this very basic fundamental problem that you need a watchdog for certain sectors in society, and you can't have the same sectors owning the watchdog.
Right.
The other issue is when there are a number of news outlets owned by big media, by a big corporate. I think we're getting to a stage where we are going to see more and more self-censorship in reporting. If the corporate sector is an important sector in this country, then you need independent voices reporting on it. If the most powerful channels are owned by the same, then it's a problem.
Not the kind of self-censorship which we all talk about. Anyway, Mr. Singh, this is not the ideal self-censorship which we can think of. When these kind of corporates enter and decide and what should go in, what should not go in. We have already had these problems. We have faced these problems in the last several years. But this is not the first time that corporates have taken interest in the media, is it?
Well, no, it's not, certainly not the first time, but it's a question of concentration and the amount of interest they have in real terms, in financial terms and so on. But I'd like to come to another aspect of it, which is worrying me at the moment, which is that the tragedy in India is that you need an impartial mechanism of some sort to have an overall regulatory framework for the media.
Right.
And at the moment what is happening is that the Press Council of India is totally dysfunctional because you have
despite Justice Karju?
Well, precisely because of him. Because you have a new chairman of the Press Council who is baiting the media. He doesn't believe in conversing with the media. He doesn't believe in exchanging views with the media. And the suspicion among Editors Guild, shall I say, is that he has been put there by the government for a specific purpose. Now, if you have that kind of situation, you can imagine how dysfunctional the whole business is. Because what you need is trust, and there is total lack of trust today between Justice Karju, who is considered to be the government's nominee, however you might put it, and the media.
Right. Right, Mr. Nihal Singh. There are several issues which we need to discuss. We will discuss the issue of a regulator, media regulator, and also the attempts made by the government to bring in some amount of regulation in the media. We'll do that after a short break. Please keep watching. We'll come back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing the investments of the corporate houses in the media. Madhu, let us just look at this Reliance investments in itself. It's a very complex web. I don't think ordinary people can understand the finances, how it has worked. I was just going through some articles. It's so complicated. The whole complex web of investments from various sources. We don't know who the companies are, and one of the more important things is that this entire TV 18 network is being controlled by them, and TV18 network will in turn control the Enadu network. What does it mean?
I think basically you just have to ask the question why.
Why?
Why is Reliance so interested in the media? It's not just to make money. It's obviously for the influence. And when you look at what Murdoch was doing, what Rupert Murdoch was doing, he was influencing the choice of prime ministers and presidents in 3 continents by his endorsement or lack of endorsement or anti any candidate. That used to influence who got elected in 3 continents. Now we have the richest man in the country owning the largest network, which means the very nature of that relationship.
And multilingual network.
Exactly. So the very nature of that relationship shows that we in journalism are supposed to present facts to people who should be suspending their disbelief. All right? So we are not fiction.
It's like watching a Bollywood movie.
They must watch us or listen to us or read us knowing that they can trust us and believe us.
Right.
When it is coming from an area where a certain point of view is cloaked by personal profit, it becomes questionable. Now,
But there
when a politician
have
such
been
as
claims. There have been claims after this deal was struck and it was announced and all that. There have been claims that the editorial control will still remain.
yeah,
with the
I read that,
journalists.
but now
And,
there are very few people like the owners of Outlook who have basically left Vinod Mehta alone, and in spite of them being raided and the usual antics that happen, which every government goes into if you write an anti-story, a negative story, or the same thing happens with corporates that they withhold the ads, and so then there's this push and pull going on. We'll have to wait and see. I really don't believe it. I don't think that, I don't believe that they would do it for not controlling the media. I think that is the purpose. Why else would he be? He's making enough money elsewhere. Why would he be interested otherwise?
And one thought he had enough influence in the government already.
But that's the thing. I mean, what we hear about in the sense that that is what's frightening, that you're influencing policy, you're influencing the way the government decides the economy, and now you're going to influence what people hear about you and the government. Because, for example, when a politician speaks, when a government spokesman particularly speaks, we know we're not going to believe them. We know they're putting out a party line. But when somebody like Rajdeep Sardesai or Sagarika or anyone on TV18 or IBN7 comes on, we presume that we should be believing them.
Absolutely.
Now, there's a big question mark right there.
Absolutely. Dilip, it is not just about, one, of course, as Madhu and both Mr. Nihal Singh, it's a matter of trust. Media is all about trust. And you think this trust is going to erode with this kind of entry of corporates into the media?
As we've discussed, corporates have entered and exited media for many years.
Yes.
Secondly,
Nehru's famous words, jute press. And
absolutely. The jute press, then we've had Pioneer, which is owned by the Thappers.
Right.
Then we have Outlook, which is owned by the... So the entry...
Mr. Nihal Singh has been a victim of it also.
The entry and exit of corporates into media is not new or news. Big entry is also not new or news. After all, we had this huge issue during the time of the television thing when Star was being bought and Murdoch was trying to enter. Now, in some senses, what has happened in this case is a distinction between foreign investment and domestic investment.
Right.
That's one big issue.
Right.
The second big issue is that because of the 4G, you also have the same business group owning the pipe, which will bring media to you and me in the next generation.
We don't know what 4G actually means.
It means essentially that you have a very big pipe which will bring stuff to you as well as to Mr. Villager in Nungambakam or in Coimbatore or in Tirunelveli. Okay, so it's essentially that. Now, when you own what goes into the pipe and you own the pipe, there could also be another issue of monopolies, which Mr. Nihal Singh raised.
Right.
So there are many issues. Should we be worried about it? Should the new owner be worried about it? In fact, if I were the owner, I would say I should set up a publicly visible trust which ensures that it has ombudsmanship of this ownership. Otherwise, there will be issues and they'll come up today or tomorrow, even for the owner, it will be a problem.
Right.
And on the other hand, if I may interrupt, see, there are organizations who were intrinsically journalistic to start with, say 50 years ago,
Absolutely.
60 years ago, and they have become increasingly corporatized, and they are selling editorial space and they're doing the worst kind of things which are unethical.
Yeah, we have-
so
I
which
mean,
are not.
there has been
so
all
there
this
is pure journalistic
what is this,
enterprises
the
who have
Bennett Cohen,
become.
the time,
Yeah,
selling
absolutely.
of whatever.
They're selling. So
Selling
what is the
space.
difference? Again do not believe those papers, but 90% of the people who read that do not know that these are planted stories or
Absolutely.
sold space.
No, let me go to Sevanthi. See, all these issues which have been raised now leads us back to this 1990s, mid-90s, late 90s, the effort of the United Front government then to bring about cross-media restrictions, which never happened. You think there needs to be a very serious debate about, bringing back cross-media restriction, at least a major debate on that?
I think basically you need a media regulator now to look at all ownership. Right now, because of Network 18 and the Mukesh Ambani deal, you are stuck on corporate ownership, but this country has also seen growing political ownership of the media.
Right.
I think what we need is a regulator who looks at ownership, a regulator who looks at content, and cross media is one of those aspects. But there has to be transparency because you have ownership and you have investors. And we don't know right now in the unlisted companies who the investors are. So I think you just have to have some measures for transparency.
Sevanthi, that's a major issue which you raised of non-disclosure. Like for instance, we didn't know that 3 years back, more than 3 years back, the Reliance had invested 2,600 crores of rupees in the ETV through one of its subsidiaries or whatever, the company's investment. Yeah. It came out only after former Chief Minister Y.S. Rajshekhar Reddy's wife, Vijayalakshmi, went to the High Court and complained about it. And then we realized that the investment, this 2,600 crores has been invested into ETV, and virtually the Reliance was controlling the ETV. We didn't know that. So let me come to Mr. Snehal Singh, sir. You're talking about regulators. Also the more important thing of disclosure. We don't have any disclosure clauses. Who owns which media? Who is operating through whom? We have no idea.
No, that of course is absolutely essential. I would agree with you 100% that we should have a transparent ownership pattern.
Yes.
And that it should be disclosed and made public.
Yes.
But there again, I think I would come back to the regulator business, because what kind of regulator are we going to have?
Sorry?
Who is credible to the media and to the public?
Right.
And there,
I'm sure we can find some people in this country who can.
well, we can, but we have
If we
to
can
make
find
sure.
a Lokpal, we can find a honest
couldn't.
regulator.
Well, we still
couldn't
haven't
find
found a
it, yeah.
Lokpal.
If we can. Yeah.
No, I think it's a very serious issue, because you can't have a real regulation which is impartial and within the ambit of a democracy, which is very important, obviously. Otherwise, there's no point.
Right.
Without having a credible man or institution which rules on these issues. And there are several issues.
We have had
I mean, it's
problems
not
with the
only
tribe.
monopoly, it is the disclosure, as you said. It's a question of cross-ownership,
Right.
which again has never been thoroughly debated in India. There was a debate, as you said, in the 90s, but
Right.
nothing came out of it. Incidentally, I found that in London, the Murdoch papers, they rode roughshod because there was no cross-ownership restriction.
Restrictions. But now it has been brought in.
Well, now, of course, they are debating it and
Right.
so on. But so all
We will,
these issues
we will,
are very
we will
important.
discuss this further, Mr. Nihal Singh. We'll discuss. Please, let's go into a short break now. We'll come back very soon. Please keep watching. Welcome back. We are discussing corporate investments in media and what it means. Madhu, see, I was mentioning earlier also, others also mentioned, even Sevanthi was mentioning, there have been attempts to bring about certain amount of regulation, 1996, 97, 98, cross-media ownership, and then came the convergence bill, and then the broadcast bill. Nothing has taken off. you know?
It can't, because I don't think regulation is something that can work. Yes, cross media ownership can, and it had been put in place earlier. But I think more than anything else, if we're looking at credibility of journalism, and especially something as large as TV18 and the Nadu thing, it's what we're looking at is very subtle plants of stories, subtle angles, subtly putting things in a certain way so that people think along in a direction for a particular policy or whatever. That is what is frightening. And regulation cannot control things that are subtly done, which are done in such an unobjectionable way that they're not even noticeable. But that is what is the most objectionable part. So I think what has happened here is, as I said earlier, that the government and the other competitors have been caught sleeping. Mukesh Ambani is going to romp home, owning all the broadband, owning most of the content that is going to push out to people the fastest and the cheapest. And he's done his homework, and he's been successful. I don't know if anyone can now shut the door after
Dilip,
it's too late.
Has the horses already bolted?
Have
we reached a stage where we cannot, do anything about it?
I think there is room for concern. There's room for, as you said, elements of self-regulation, all of that. But also, don't forget that as a country, we are not able to legislate for this precisely for a second reason, besides the huge policy influence that the business houses may have. There's also the fact that when you bring this legislation up, the other group that is affected is the group that Shevanti referred to, politicians who own media houses of their own. So you are talking about now a coalition of forces which the public is incapable of handling. So I don't think that you'll be able to see even Parliament do the kind of regulation that it should in a kind of open manner, because there are interests on all sides.
Shevanti, what the voices which we are hearing from all the panelists here, it seems really alarming. Do you think that at this point of time, when, as Madhu was saying, that he has already, Mukesh Ambani has done his homework, more and more probably more and more corporates may start getting interested in similar deals with other television channels. Print is yet to be affected in the way the television has been affected. Do you see this happening to the print also in the coming days?
It has happened.
No, I think we have to stop getting hysterical, because the fact is that the print media is not got the same thing happening there. What you're seeing is, particularly in television, because of the inherent unviability which a lot of TV networks are going through because of excessive competition and carriage fees and all sorts of other problems. Print actually began with big corporate, and gradually a lot of those families no longer have links with big industry. With the Birlas are down to one company owned by this lady. The Times of India is not linked anymore to other big corporate companies, other industries. So in print, the opposite has happened, actually. And I don't think we need to get hysterical about print, because I think that's fine.
Okay. Mr. Nihal Singh.
And I just want to say that you don't have to wait for a regulator. You can just have a policy regulation, which to begin with requires every media house to declare on its website who the investors and owners are.
As Mr. Dilip Cherian was pointing out, and you yourself were pointing out earlier, there is this conglomeration of interests between the corporates and the political class who are also into owning, the media houses. So how do we get out of this kind of a situation?
But I think parliamentarians have to ask themselves, because, a lot of them own media houses now.
Right. Okay.
And,
Yeah, Mr. Singh, so where are we heading, and where do we put brakes on this? Is it possible for this country at this point of time to recover the lost ground, which, as Dilip was earlier pointing out, the ordinary people, the consumer, seems to have no say in anything what is happening?
No, I think the first thing is, of course, it's a long haul and it's going to take time and so on. But at least we can make the public aware of the problems, and we can begin by that. that there is a problem or there are problems, and we need to resolve those problems. As I said, unfortunately, the Press Council of India has ruled itself out, in my view.
How do you view the role of Editors Guild at this point of time?
No, the Editors Guild obviously is, for instance, we are going to discuss this very issue in the Editors Guild, which is an important thing, and to put our own house in order. Because we have failings, nobody denies that.
Right.
I think we have to be more vigorous in trying to redeem the failings we have.
Right. Madhu and Dilip, just last words, quickly.
I think the only hope is that if people, if we journalists educate readers as in a way of consumers watch, which there are organizations that do. There's there's Sans Serif, WordPress, there's Shivanti's Hoot.org. There are organizations that if we can educate the reader, the consumer, on how to consume the news and say, okay, now we
Right.
know that this is owned by this corporate house, so read it with that color.
Absolutely. Dilip, last word.
I think that the future lies with the consumer and with alternate forms of media besides the ones that she's talking about, the watchdogs. Today, there are global platforms available, and actually almost every consumer becomes a news organization himself. And that's going to be a great whistleblower for this industry.
Absolutely. So, at the end of the discussion, it's evident that this is a matter of very, very serious concern. We need to keep this debate going. This country needs to understand what it means when major, big corporate houses get into media. Anyway, this is not a debate which should end very soon. Thanks to all my guests, Sevanti Nayanan, Mr. Niyal Singh, Madhu Trehan, and Dilip Cherian. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture.